Good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
Susan is how you'd like to be called, is it?
Yeah, it's Sue or Susan.
Sue or Sue or Sue?
Whatever you want.
No, it's whatever you want, really. As long as you're happy with Sue, I shall use Sue.
Okay.
In a moment or two, Sue, Ms. Richards is going to ask you some questions. It's necessary to take the oath first, so Mary will ask you to affirm.
Okay.
Take your time. You have all the time you want. If you want to break at any stage, just ask.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
There.
Please state your full name
Susan Hallwood.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely,
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Sue, you're here to tell us about your two sons, Brian and Stephen.
Yes.
You've got a third son, Thomas, and he's here supporting you today.
Yes.
But you and he have agreed that Brian and Stephen are going to be the focus of your oral evidence this morning.
Yes.
So Brian was born in 1977
Yes.
and Stephen in 1980.
Yes.
And they both had haemophilia A.
Yes.
And that didn't come as a surprise, I think, because you had some family history of
Yeah.
haemophilia.
I had a brother.
Brian was classed as a moderate haemophiliac
Yes.
and Stephen as a severe haemophiliac. And you lived in the Liverpool area and they both were treated at Alder Hospital. And as you know, Alder is going to be the focus of my questions to
Yes.
you this morning. Can you recall how old they were when they were diagnosed with haemophilia A? Was it when they were babies?
Yeah, I thought it was, they took a blood test when they were born, at the hospitals they were born at. I'm sure it was then. They'd done a foot prick.
And can you tell us a little about the boys?
I know every mum says, gorgeous, but God, that they were. Sorry.
It's all right, take all the time you need.
Come on. When they were ill and someone else was ill, they'd look after them before themselves. And that was Brian and Steve. They were just two lovely boys. Yes, had haemophilia. Played football in the garden, goals up. Done everything little boys did.
Now, we know from your statement and from their medical records that they were both treated with factor VIII concentrates.
Yeah.
And we'll look at some of the treatment sheets just so that I can read out and show the chair and others some of the treatment details. Did they receive that when they were little in hospital or at home?
The factor VIII.
The factor VIII?
At hospital.
At the hospital. So at Alder.
Yes.
And was that on ward C3 at
Yes.
that time? And we'll come back and talk a little bit about the ward later. Did they ever receive cryoprecipitate?
I have tried and tried thinking, and I don't know.
Okay.
I think I was too amazed in the bleeds and what they were having. I just thought the hospital give them the safest thing.
And certainly, I don't think we found any trace in their records of cryoprecipitate treatment. I'm going to look at the treatment sheet first of all for Brian, and then the treatment sheets for Stephen, just so that we can get an idea of what they were being treated with and when. Okay. And you can look at them if you want to, and if you don't want to look at the documents, you don't need to. Okay. Lawrence, could we have on screen, please, WITN 1267002. If we go to the second page, we can see it says haemophilia treatment sheet at the top, and then we've got Brian's name.
Yeah.
Can we go to page 5 first? Oh, no, actually, we can stick with this page. I'm sorry, Lawrence. So we've got some dates here, and we can see on the left-hand column, we've got March, and it's obvious it's 1980, although the zero's cut off slightly on the first date. So we can see in March 1980, Brian's received Elstree factor 8, and then by June of 1980, he's being treated with factor 8, which is the commercial armour product. And if we just look at the whole page, please, Lawrence.
And he's 2 years old.
Yes, exactly. 2 years old when this treatment sheet starts, and then so when he's starting to receive the commercial product in June 1980, he's still not yet 3. So we see for the rest of that period, and this sheet takes us into 1982, he's receiving the commercial concentrate factor 8. If we then go, please, to page 7, and these sheets, and these are the hospital sheets, they're not entirely in order. We can see there, 1982, there's a mix of Elstree and commercial concentrate. There's no heading at the top, but assuming it takes the same form as the rest of the sheets, that seems to be predominantly factor 8. And then in 1983 and 4, there's some administration of what looks like Elstree product. But if we go back to page 5, and we look at the top half of the page, we can see there it's the commercial concentrate factor 8 being given 1984 and into 1985 there, sir.
It's a slightly difficult document to interpret that because the columns don't necessarily correspond with what's at the top of the column.
That's possibly the case.
I mean, it could be Elstree factor 8. One would have to interpret the batch numbers, presumably.
Yes. But in any event, there's clearly a pattern of, or no discernible treatment policy, but sometimes it's Elstree and sometimes, quite often,
I mean, we're going to see
it's factor 8.
HY, for instance, 8Y, which is almost certainly Elstree,
Yes.
at 12,386. So it's a mix. It's what it looks like.
And then we'll just look at the treatment sheet, a similar set of treatment sheets for Stephen. So if we could go to WITN 1267003. We start on page 5. And we'll see the first date is 1982. Stephen's just 2 at that point in time. And we'll see this is a clearer sheet, and it's the armour product factor 8 that's given consistently if we look at the whole page throughout that period of time. If we go to page 4, we can see a further set of treatment continuing 1982 into 1983, so into being 3 years old, still the armour product factor 8. If we go to page 3, my apologies. We pick it up in 1984, and there we see the tick for factor 8, first 3 months of 1984. Then there's 4 entries which look like it's the Elstree factor 8, and then we get into early 1985, and it's the commercial product, the armour factor 8, throughout 1985, as seen on this sheet.
Again, there may be difficulties of interpretation because if HLA is an Elstree product, as the tick might indicate against the 84 entries, then the tick may be misplaced in the 85 entries. It's difficult to tell, isn't it?
We can match those up against batch numbers, I'm sure.
Yes.
But We do have in Stephen's case 2 medical reports, as you know, sir,
Yes.
which give us a summary of his treatment and make absolutely clear he was very extensively treated with the commercial product, Factor 8 product.
Yes.
And there are references here and there in the notes to other commercial concentrates, Cutter and Alpha in Stephen's case, I think.
Yes. So he had a wide range of commercial concentrate.
He did. And if I can just, so without putting Brian's medical records up on screen, can I just give you a couple of pieces of information from Brian's records about treatment? The URN for your note is WITN 1267017. And you'll see, if you look, sir, at page 7 of that, we don't need it on screen, Lawrence. In July of 1983, so that would be not long after the June 1983 letter was sent out by the UK HCDO directors, concentrate being given. We see the administration of concentrates continuing in the medical records in 1983 and 1984. If you look at page 11 of those medical records, you'll see 20th of December, and again dates in December. And I choose that date because of the significance of the meeting that took place at Elstree earlier in December. We see the administration of factor concentrates for Brian continuing with no apparent change of policy or change of approach to treatment at all.
Well, it doesn't look as though there's any change of policy after the start of 1983, as one might have anticipated there might have been, given the events and the Heathrow meeting and the San Francisco baby. The May letter from the UK HCDO appears to recognise an existing practice in which children of this age don't get factor concentrate, but there's nothing else given to these children. And there's no change when the first known death of a haemophiliac is reported in August, September.
No change at all?
Yes.
Sue, what were you told by Alder, whoever it might have been at Alder you had dealings with, about factor concentrates before Brian or Stephen started receiving them?
Nothing.
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 Were you told they might or probably would, or almost certainly would, transmit hepatitis?
No.
As the treatment of Brian and Stephen continued with concentrates into 1982, 83, 84, were you told anything about the risk of transmission of AIDS?
No.
Were you told that commercial concentrates might be higher risk than NHS concentrates?
No.
And were you told that there might be alternatives to the use of concentrates, particularly given their young age, such as cryoprecipitate?
No.
Dr. John Martin was the consultant with responsibility for their treatment, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Did you know that he wasn't a haematologist and that haemophilia wasn't his speciality?
I didn't then. I do now. But I didn't then. I just thought it was all... I used to call it the bloods ward because leukemia, haemophilia, it's always been that way.
When you would take the boys to the ward for their treatment, was it the nurses who would administer it usually, or was it ever doctors? Do you recall?
No, they just went and got a doctor.
So there would be a doctor, it might be a junior doctor. Was it sometimes Dr. Martin, do you recall?
No, never Dr. Martin.
So a junior doctor would be called, and
Yeah.
then they'd give the factor concentrate to the boys.
We waited till the doctor come on to the ward.
And you'd be with the boys?
Yeah.
So there'd be plenty of opportunity for a doctor to talk to you about the treatment?
Yes.
But they never talked to you about the risks?
No.
There came a point when the boys started being given a heat-treated concentrate. And we can see from the treatment sheets that a project called 8Y, which was a product, an NHS product that they received, it looks like, for the first time in March of 1986. Did Dr. Martin or anyone else ever talk to you about changing from unheated to heated products?
I don't know whether this was, I'm sure this was because I think Scotland got heat treated before us, and all about Mags, she said, we're waiting for a new treatment to come in now. It's heat treated, but we've got to wait for it. So she did tell us.
Now, there came a point, probably I think in 1985, second half of 1985, when you received a letter from the hospital.
Yeah.
And that was a letter telling you that both Brian and Stephen had tested positive for HTLV3,
Yeah.
what we now call HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Before you got that letter, had you known that the boys were being tested?
They were told to come up for a blood test, and then the results of the blood test come through in the letter. We were told by the letter then what the blood tests were.
So you were just told it was a blood test, you weren't told what it was for?
No, just said the blood test to bring them up. So I didn't really think much of it, because sometimes the haemophilia boys get blood tests done. So I didn't really think much of it, but then the letter come.
You haven't got a copy of the letter. Can you just tell us your recollection of receiving it and what happened?
Yeah. Well, that day, my mum and dad were actually there visiting, and post come, opened it. I said to my dad, what does that mean? I said, this is the blood test results. I said, what does it mean? And why, I don't know whether that AIDS tombstone come down, had I just seen that, or whether I heard something, but it must have been I'd heard about AIDS, and because it triggered me a little bit before, I thought to myself, as I said to my dad, what's that? So he turned around and he said, give us the paper. I went, right. And he went, but at that time, I was starting to faint, because I thought to myself, I didn't understand. Everything was going through my mind. And the next minute, my dad went to a GP, Dr. Hillman, took the letter with him, and said, look what she's got through post. Now, I don't know where the letter is, whether he's since well retired, Dr. Hillman. He could have died by now. Whether he's got it, I know it's not in my dad's papers. He's since died, and I know Mum and brother said they're not there.
And it's not in the medical records that your solicitors have got for Brian and Stephen. So we don't have a copy of that letter. But I know you've seen a copy of a letter that was sent around that time to other parents. I'm going to put it up on screen, but we know it's not your letter, and we've redacted the names of the parents to whom it was addressed. It's DHSC 00395536. And we can see this one's dated the 28th of August 1985. As I say, it was directed to the parents of another child, and we've seen, the inquiry's seen examples of this letter in this form for more than one patient. And we can pick it up in the third line. It says, I have to tell you that blank name does show the presence of HTLV3 antibodies, i.e. he has evidence of antibodies against the virus that is thought to cause AIDS. And as I understand it, Sue, you think this might have been the letter that
The
you
top
got.
part of it, just because I seen AIDS, and that's when I said to my dad, "What's that? What is it?" And so the top part sort of, yeah, that. I'm sure it was that one. I'm sure it was. I just remember seeing that AIDS. Yeah.
So you were told your 8-year-old son and your 5-year-old son had tested positive for the virus that caused AIDS by a letter that came out of the blue because you didn't even know they'd been tested. We can take that down, thank you. You've told us in your statement that you were asked to go to the hospital the following week. And we're in, I think, late August, early September 1985, probably, looking at various bits and pieces of information. The inquiry's heard evidence or seen evidence from others that there was a group meeting, a meeting of a number of parents. Was that the meeting that you went to?
Yeah, Dr. Martin calls us up there.
Can you tell us your memory of that meeting, Sue?
Yeah. Right. He told us all to not be coming up with coughs and colds. And I sort of looked and he went, if you get a cold, don't be coming up like that. And I'm sorry, but my mind switched then. He might have said more stuff, but I just wasn't listening. I think, well, you can't think what I was thinking at that moment.
I'm sure most people listening, Sue, can have a sense of what might have been going through your mind there. And I'm just going to read what you said in your statement about that. You said, "We were asked to go to Alder the following week. Dr. Martin was standing there and he said, I don't want you all coming up here with coughs and colds. He basically told us that if they had symptoms, he didn't want us to bring them to the hospital, as not all symptoms were a result of HIV." How often after that, after September 1985, did you see Dr. Martin? Could you recall?
When I took the boys up to C3, we seen him passing. When he seen us there, I'm speaking on my family now, his face seemed to go down and it was like, oh, you're back up here again. So I thought, we never seen him. We seen other doctors that could have been going anywhere in the hospital. Really, we didn't have a doctor for us.
And did he ever sit down with you individually and explain to you how your children had been infected with HIV?
No.
Did he ever offer you any form of explanation or apology?
No.
In terms of dates of results, again, I don't think we need to put the documents on the screen, but I'll just read the reference numbers. WITN 1267004 and WITN 1267005. Those are documents that suggest, certainly in relation to Stephen, that a blood sample was taken on the 8th of August 1985 and a positive result came back. We don't, I think, have the test results, a record of those in either Brian or Stephen's medical records. And then, sir, for your note, WITN 1267006 is a letter from 1990, and again, it says that Brian tested positive in 1985, but we don't have the precise dates.
So there is a record somewhere, but it's not in his records.
Not in the medical records. So we know both boys tested positive in 1985, and it, again, putting the dates together, it may well have been in August of 1985 that the tests were undertaken, but we don't have the test results themselves. Having learned that both boys had been infected in this way, What information or support or advice did you get from Alder Hay?
Nothing.
Nothing? Before I ask you a little more about the course of first Stephen's illness and then Brian's, I'm just going to put up on screen 2 medical reports which are about Stephen. They were prepared, I think, as part of the HIV haemophilia litigation, and I know you've seen them.
Yeah.
I'm going to read out some bits of them, Sue. If you want to look at them on the screen, do. If you don't want to look at them, you don't need to. Okay. So you may recall from the Alder Hay presentation that I referred to these reports and we looked at them then, but obviously we'd redacted the name of the patient to whom they related at that point in time. But I can confirm they're both reports in relation to Stephen.
These were reports, were they, from Dr. Savage and Dr. Ludlam?
That's right. That's right. And they do give us some more information, both about Stephen's specific treatment, but also they cast some light upon what Dr. John Martin may or may not have been thinking. So if we can look first of all at DHSC 00436164_068. This is the report from Professor Savage, and we can see there Stephen's name, as I say, redacted when we looked at this before. And it refers to the sources of information Professor Savage had. They include copies of the complete hospital records from Alder Hay, and then copies of letters from the patient's GP. And then he refers to UK Haemophilia Reference Centre directors' meetings. We can pick it up at the bottom of the page, where he says this: the young boy was first treated on the 1st of March 1982 with US commercial factor VIII concentrate. So Professor Savage, having the benefit at that point of perhaps a fuller set of records than we have, that was how he understood the position. And then he makes this observation: there is no documentation at that time to indicate that the treatment alternatives with Singer donor pool cryoprecipitate or NHS factor VIII concentrates were ever entertained. During 1982, Stephen Hallward was treated on 32 occasions with US concentrate, ARMA, and on 5 occasions with NHS material, factor VIII concentrate. And just as a reminder, he was 2. This year proved to be the 12 months prior to 1985 that required the most frequent hospital visits, necessitating infusions with factor VIII concentrates. During 1982, some 19,000 units of factor VIII were used. In 1983, 7 treatments were administered with US commercial concentrates and 2 with NHS concentrates, totaling in all approximately 5,500 units. In 1984, 4 treatments were given with US commercial concentrates, 4 with NHS concentrates, giving a total of approximately 4,000 units for the year. The last treatment given during 1984 on the 2nd of December with ARMA factor VIII concentrate. And you'll see, so the batch reference there, so the batches with X are ARMA products. This occasion was the only time this batch of unheated material was used. In 1985, Stephen was treated on 9 occasions with heat-treated US concentrates, on 2 occasions with US unheated concentrates, on 2 occasions with NHS unheated concentrate, and on 6 occasions with the earliest NHS heated factor VIII material. The 2 occasions when the unheated ARMA factor VIII were used were on the 2nd of January 85 and 22nd of January 85 for a spontaneous hemarthrosis of the left elbow. This unheated material was batch number Y88908, which had not been administered to the patient before and was not used subsequently. To my knowledge, at other centres, much of this unheated batch had been returned to the manufacturer, who subsequently heated the product in one of their facilities in West Germany. And then just going to the last few lines on this page, although the child was seen on several occasions in 1985, the first documentation of blood sampling for antibody to HTLV3 was on the 5th of August 1985, and the result indicating HTLV3 zero positivity was reported on the 8th of August 1985. So, sir, just pausing there, you will see there essentially a clear explanation from Professor Savage of the nature of the treatments that were given, when they were given, and what might be said to be the somewhat remarkable indication that even in January 1985, an unheated commercial concentrate was being given to a young child. If we just go to the section opinion, and are you okay if I carry on reading this, Sue? Okay. This is Professor Savage's opinion. This case concerns a young child with severe haemophilia who was treated from 1982 to 1985 with unheated US commercial and NHS factor 8 concentrates for hemorrhagic symptoms. And then he refers to the patient's test in August of 1985. If we go over the page, under the heading, use of concentrates as opposed to cryoprecipitate, Professor Savage says this: there are two notable features of this case with respect to the adopted therapeutic approach. Firstly, there is no documentary evidence to suggest that single donor pool cryoprecipitate was ever contemplated in the management of this case, not even when the patient was initially treated. Secondly, there is evidence to indicate a defined preference to use US commercial products, 45 treatments, over NHS factor 8 concentrate, 9 treatments, during the period 1982 to 85, when initially only unheated but subsequently heated products were available. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the majority of UK paediatricians treating infants and children with severe haemophilia considered cryoprecipitate obtained from single blood donations to be the therapeutic product of choice, but if not available, NHS factor concentrate should be used. And then I won't read out the rest of this page, but Professor Savage goes on to refer to various materials that informed the opinion that he there set out. And then if we go to the next page, in the second paragraph, he sets out his view about the advantages of cryoprecipitate. He says this: furthermore, sufficient amounts of factor 8 necessary to control haemorrhagic symptoms in such small children were available in only a few single donor bags of cryoprecipitate, providing a safe and highly cost-effective approach to such cases. The somewhat larger infusion volumes with such treatments compared to the smaller reconstitution volumes of concentrates were not considered to disadvantage the increased safety aspects of this therapeutic approach. As small amounts of cryoprecipitate were usually required to manage such children, availability of the material from the local blood transfusion service was in general no particular problem, and orders could be placed in advance to ensure adequate supplies for individual patients. The side effects occasionally encountered with cryoprecipitate, rashes, asthma-like symptoms, were usually easily controllable with antihistamines and did not impose a relative or absolute contraindication for its use. As the child required treatment in hospital for each bleed, often leading to subsequent inpatient management, any perceived additional convenience for using factor 8 concentrates cannot be considered a pertinent argument for their exclusive use over cryoprecipitate when the issues of safety and cost effectiveness are also addressed. And then Professor Savage says this, looking essentially at Dr. Martin's treatment of Stephen: the lack of consideration and disregard of the then current therapeutic recommendations for the treatment of children under the age of 4 years regarding the use of cryoprecipitate in this case was negligent.
I hate that man. I hate him. I'm sorry.
You don't need to apologise for saying that, sir.
I know. I'm sorry. I just hate him.
Do you want some water?
Would you like a break? Sue? You'd like a break? Well, let's take a break for 5 minutes.
So Sue would like me to continue reading the reports because she wants people to hear what they say.
Well, I'm not at all surprised.
So can we put back on screen, please, Lawrence, DHSC 0043164_068. And if we go to page 6, I'm going to pick up where I left off with Professor Savage saying this. And essentially, he deals with what might be counter-arguments and dismisses them. He says there's any argument that cryoprecipitate was in poor supply at the time is untenable, since the material was being used in significant amounts for home therapy. And he refers there to the minutes of a UK HCDO meeting in February 81. The overwhelming use of commercial US concentrates in preference to cryoprecipitate or NHS factor 8 is remarkable, particularly in a large city such as Liverpool, known to have an active blood transfusion service with facilities for cryoprecipitate production and regularly supplying plasma to Elstree for fractionation. The lack of a well-defined therapeutic policy regarding preferential use of domestic plasma derivatives in children at this time was negligent, particularly since the factor 8 requirement in this case during 1983 and 1984 was so minimal, 5,500 units in 83 and 4,000 in 84, that special reserves of cryoprecipitate or NHS factor 8 could have been set aside. And then Dr. Savage refers to the minutes of the UK HCDO meeting in May 1983, which so I know you're familiar with. And then at the bottom of the page, last 4 lines, he says, again referring to those minutes, he says, those are the recommendations that were given to directors, were clearly not followed in this case. And then he refers to those recommendations having been reiterated elsewhere. And then over the page, Dr. Savage sets out a range of material which he says would have been available to doctors. I'm not going to read through the details of those materials, but he lists a range of publications in the Lancet and elsewhere. And then he refers halfway down this passage to the December 1984 meeting of UK Haemophilia Centre directors and the recommendation to stop using US commercial unheated material. And then if we pick it up, Lawrence, it's about the last 8 lines, please. Despite this information with which a competent practicing paediatric haematologist could be expected to be conversant, and a further report by Bloom in January 1985, which stated that at least 2 batches of NHS concentrate had transmitted HIV and urged the use of heat-treated concentrates, Stephen Hallward was given 2 infusions of unheated US concentrate in January 1985 and 2 infusions of unheated NHS concentrates in March 1985. The infusion of these untreated therapeutic agents at these times, when heat-treated commercial concentrates were commercially available, was negligent, and from the available data, these treatments could have been the likely causation whereby HTLV3 was transmitted to the patient, which subsequently led to the development of AIDS in this child. So a very clear report from Professor Savage in March 1992 about Stephen. And then so you know that there was also a report in the litigation from Dr. Ludlam, as he then was, again, looking specifically at the treatment provided to Stephen. It's DHSC 0043164_067. _067. Could we go to page 7, please? So if we just look at the bottom of the page, there's reference there to blood product treatment as recorded in haemophilia treatment sheets of Alder Children's Hospital, and those are the sheets that we were looking at earlier, Sue, that listed the treatments for Stephen and Brian. And then Dr. Ludlam says there's no transfusion record for factor 8 concentrate infusions in 1981 in the case notes, but it seems likely that he was treated with factor 8 as it was this blood product that he received throughout the following year. Most patients were treated with this project at Alder Hospital in 1981. And then you'll see there's a reference details in transfusion summary book of ward D3. That's not a document that we have, sir. If we go over the page, I don't need to read through all this. Dr. Ludlam sets out, again, a summary of the different treatments that Stephen received. If we can go over the page. What I want to just flag up is Dr. Ludlam clearly had access for the purpose of preparing this report to some comments from Dr. Martin. We don't have those comments, so we only know from this report what Dr. Ludlam had been told was Dr. Martin's position. And so I'm just going to look at that. If we look at, first of all, at the paragraph number 2, it says in the third line, in Dr. Martin's evidence, and as I say, that's we haven't been able to find this, it is stated that he was aware of the risks of hepatitis transmission by concentrates. Just pausing there, Sue. And Dr. Martin never told you about the risks of hepatitis transmission. And then it continues that cryoprecipitate was effectively phased out in 1980 and that treatment was advised by the Royal Liverpool Hospital.
But it's just pausing there for a moment. The statement effectively phased out in 1980 may help to explain what Professor Savage said in his report when he said, well, that's nonsense, in effect. There's plenty of it available.
Yes, I mean, what this appears to show is a conscious decision to cease using cryoprecipitate, not an inability to use cryoprecipitate because it wasn't available or couldn't be made available.
Yes.
And then there's reference, and I don't propose to go through the detail of this, to there being, so Dr. Martin's evidence that Dr. Ludlam had access to apparently being that he took his lead from the Royal Liverpool Hospital. Dr. McVery, who, as you know, was the director at this time at the Royal Liverpool Hospital, his evidence it says, accord with that. And so Dr. Ludlam then poses a number of questions, which he obviously thought were pertinent questions to ask. Why was it decided to phase out cryoprecipitate? Was there a policy about which patients should receive NHS and which commercial? Why was concentrate purchased from Armour rather than another supplier? So clearly, Dr. Ludlam thought those were pertinent questions to ask and didn't have the answer to in the material he'd received from Dr. Martin. And then he goes on to say about Stephen, the patient could have been treated effectively with cryoprecipitate in the first few years of life whilst receiving treatment as an outpatient. If cryoprecipitate was not available, then NHS concentrate would be the most appropriate therapy. And then it's only essentially, as I read his report, he's saying if you haven't got those two, only then do you go to commercial concentrate. And then the next paragraph, sir, and I appreciate none of this is easy for Sue to hear, but I know you want me to carry on. Dr. Martin, it would appear, in 1992 when this report was done, was saying he had no recollection of receiving the letter of the 24th of June 1985 from Professor Bloom and Dr. Ritzer. And you may recall he didn't attend the meetings of the UK HCDO. And then paragraph 4 asks for Dr. Martin's comments on a later letter from December 1984, and again asks the question to which Dr. Ludlam obviously hadn't been given an answer: when did Alder Hospital change over to the use of heat-treated concentrates? And then perhaps if we just go over the page. No, perhaps, sorry, can I pick it up at the very bottom of the page? The previous page, sorry. No mention is made in the case notes or in Dr. Martin's submission about what was said either specifically or in general about the possibility of virus transmission by blood products. It would be useful to know what information was made available to patients or parents. Sue's told us the information that was made available to her, which, as I understand your evidence, Sue, was nothing.
Yeah. Yes.
We can take that down. So I'm going to ask you now to a little about the course, first of all, of Stephen's illness. I know it's not easy evidence to give. I can take bits from your statement if it's easier. Okay?
No.
I think by October 1987, Stephen had developed pneumonia. That's what
Yeah.
your statement tells us. So Stephen began to be ill
Yeah.
quite soon after he was diagnosed as having been infected.
Yeah.
Don't worry about dates.
I don't know.
Don't worry about dates.
It all seems...
Yeah,
Yeah, I took him, is it all right to say I took him up to Alder for up to about 7 weeks, over the 7 weeks period. He was coughing like anything, and my nose, it was a funny cough, terrible. Put a little balaclava on him and everything, and kept him warm, put him up on the pillows. No. And I was asking all, it's like the haemophilia had a meeting. I went there, but everyone was scared. Everyone was terrified. I didn't know. And Dr. Hay was there, I think it was.
Yeah, that might have been. He was at the Royal Liverpool Hospital,
Yeah.
the adult hospital in Liverpool. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, not long, there's going to be a doctor coming to treat the boys, you know, a haemophilia doctor. So I said, there's something the matter with Steve. I said, so I went back and thought, well, I'll wait for this doctor then to come. And he was getting worse. So what I done was I took him to A&E, Alder A&E. The doctor took a X-ray of his chest and then said to me, he's got pneumocystis. I never seen him move so fast. He was up on ISOL 3 then, put there then. And I didn't know what pneumocystis was. I didn't know it was AIDS. It might have been me, I just didn't know. And he was really poorly. Anyway, they got him as well as they could do, and let him home. I think it was after a few weeks. The nurses on there were absolutely brilliant, because one of the nurses, the sister, had told me I'd gone home to have a shower and my auntie was sitting there. I always wanted someone there with the boys. And she said the journalists know there's somebody in the hospital with AIDS. So I turned around and I said, she said, won't come from here. So they never did find out it was Stephen. And as I say, we took him home. He was never himself again then. He was never himself. I don't know whether or whether you want me to
No.
say other.
So, I mean, we'll pick up on some of the details too, but your statement and the records, and I'm not going to read aloud the medical records.
Oh God,
I know it's
I
hard.
forgot something. I've gone straight
Don't
through
worry.
there. And I'm rattling on like, oh, the most important thing. Well, apart from Stephen's most important thing. I took him up, I don't know how many times, to Alder Hay, Steve, with this cough. I wouldn't mind. Dr. Martin even examined his chest, kept saying, he's okay. I said, no, he's not. His cough's really bad. Anyway, it was over a 7-week period this went on. And this doctor was there. My Dr. Martin was examining Stephen. This doctor I'd never seen him before. I didn't even know who he was. We were in G3 at the time, and because that was leukemia ward, and C3 was empty. Anyway, I thought he had something. He was telling me something really bad about Stephen. Dr. Martin had told him to go and say to him while he was examining. And he went, Mrs. Alder, do you think you're a bit of an over-anxious mum? And I went, what? I said, he's been coughing. He's been coughing for near enough 2 months. It's not right. It's not a cough that you'll say it's a normal cough. There's something the matter with him. I think it's just you. So that's when I took him to A&E.
And the various documents that we've got about from Stephen's medical records and some of the documents exhibited to your statement, which I'm not going to go through the detail of the records on the screen. They describe Stephen's deteriorating condition over that period of time. And so for your note, at WITN 1267009, page 12, there's a letter in March 1988 from Dr. Bolton Maggs, which gives a sense of how Stephen was at that point in time. And then the records continue with the same reference to describe Stephen's continued deterioration. He started, I think, getting abdominal pains and getting confused. You've told us in your statement, essentially, that with Stephen's illness and knowing Brian had also been infected, you put it this way, your lives were put on hold and you merely existed. Can you... Your life became dominated by looking after Stephen and trying to deal also with Brian and with Thomas at that time.
I was their mum. I said, Mum, just do what mums do after them.
And in terms of the stigma of AIDS at that time, I think when you were wheeling Stephen in a wheelchair because he needed that help, you used to tell people he had leukemia.
I went to the shops and pushed him into the shop. And the lady said, oh, is he all right? Because the little children you see on the television where they had no weight on them. Well, Stephen had gone like that. He was just with no weight on him. And I had to say leukemia. So that's what the boys had, leukemia.
And you talked also in your statement that sometimes those who were medically trained had what you've described as a dreadful attitude. So there was a doctor who, even though he wasn't even examining the boys, but was just talking to them, would put on gloves.
I didn't actually, it was one of the nurses on A3, the general ward, and she gave him a good telling off. She said, there's no need for that, you're only talking to him. There was no need for it whatsoever.
And you've described also a bank nurse who questioned other nurses about the fact they were drinking out of cups that your sons had previously used. But you've said the regular staff, the regular nursing staff are brilliant.
I couldn't ask for more. They were lovely, really lovely.
There was a request made to social services for a slope at the front of the house to make it easier for a wheelchair and easier to get in and out of the car.
Stephen,
What do you recall what someone said to you about that?
Well, he had to come in the house and Stephen didn't look well then. He was losing a lot of weight, as I said. And he said, is it worth getting the slope or something like that? Is it worth getting the slope? It looks like you'd be dead before it's done. So, right. I remember going up to Alder then, and I think it was a woman. We'd just been appointed a social security, or whatever they're called. And I told her, I said, I want him sacked. I said, he doesn't know anything about Stephen, nor Brian. I said, he's there to say whether we're going to get a slope or not to say when my child's going to die.
You told us in your statement, Sue, that Stephen continued to deteriorate. He suffered very badly. He was treated with AZT, but he had tonsillitis, earaches, vomiting, chest infections.
He suffered terrible. Yeah.
And then Stephen died in 1989. He died at home.
Yeah.
And he was 9 years old.
Yeah.
Sue, in your statement, you told us about when he died, you didn't want to let go of him. Do you want me to read that, or we can just take it as read?
I remember going hysterical and just, I don't know what I was doing. I don't know. I don't know. I just screamed. Then I went in and I grabbed hold of him and I put him on my lap and I just put my arms around him. And I thought, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. And he wasn't. He had haemophilia. That's what he had. He had haemophilia. He shouldn't have died. And then they couldn't get him off me then. So when the funeral directors come to take him, I said, you better bring him back. And then they were saying they can't bring him back. And I went into the garden and I was screaming and shouting, you will bring him back, or I'll go in there tonight and I'll steal him from the and they said, you better do, because she'll break in tonight some way and she'll get him. And I remember they brought the Stephen back quick then. And I wanted to see him, but they'd nailed the coffin down, so I couldn't see him. The only time I could see him is when I had hold of him. I couldn't. They nailed it down. Why? Haemophilia. He was born with haemophilia. I don't understand.
So I'm going to ask you a little about Brian now. Do you want us to take a break before we do so, or would you like to carry on?
No, just get it.
You'd like to carry on?
Yeah, please.
So Brian, who was a little older, but only 3 years older than Stephen, Brian knew his younger brother died of the illness that Brian
And like a little husband, because we were a one-parent family, and he was like a little husband. He'd two younger brothers.
And Brian became depressed. When we, through 1989 into the early 1990s, Brian's health started to deteriorate.
Yeah, he had sore throats. I could have swore Lynn said he had quinsy at one time he went up, and his tonsils were thinking, she said quinsy. And there was other things that were happening to him as well. So they put him on steroids.
So he gained weight.
So he went the opposite to Stephen, and the weight was getting so bad. He went, Mum, I don't want to be on these anymore. He said, I don't like this. I don't. And I went, so do you want me to talk more about Brian's?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
As much as you want to.
Okay. So he had all them, and he was going to be an artist. He loved art. Bought him diesel and everything. He had an art room. And he loved it, and I went, please, that virus don't ever attack his brain, please. Anyway, in my eyes, the virus started to attack his brain. anywhere on his death certificate. And I was never told. Whether they told me in a sort of way, medical term way, and I didn't get it. And I saw, and the headaches started, and they were getting worse. And one night, he was in bed, and he had, I know now, grand mal seizures. And I'd never seen seizures before. And so I was just going and screaming, I had this attack in this. And I rang the ambulance. In all this time, it's supposed to be quiet. Nobody's supposed to know or anything. But I think I was just, I don't know what I was. I rang and said, the virus is attacking his brain, and they said we'd be. I had a lovely ambulance man come. Took him to hospital. Even the next day, the ambulance man come back to see how Brian was. But all the next day and the night before, he was having grand mals. And I said, what's going on? What's this? What is? I said, I don't understand why he's having seizures. I'd never seen any seizures in Stephen. So Brian's was totally different. Anyway, I turned around and I said, they kept him in, but by that time, he'd been brought off a quiet ward, which we'd been brought up on, to a general ward. Now, in a general ward, you've got all sorts, broken arm, everything. And Brian's head, he just like putting it through the window all the time, so the pain was getting worse. And I think they put him on pentamidine, I think it was, they put him on. But it was, you had to break it and inject it. So he was on that. And there was a gate outside of his cubicle. And Bryce was crying with the pain. He said, I can't take it anymore. And I said, so I said to Paul about Miles, I said, we've got to get him on another ward because the gate. I said, no more wards. And there was a little one in there who was somebody's little sister, was banging the gate. Well, if you can imagine, you've just got an ordinary headache and the gates, but this was a powerful headache, really powerful. I could see it in his face. Anyway, he was on that ward, and I said to Paula, if you've got nothing else to do on him, I want to take him home where it's quiet. But while we were at home, I gave him some, because he said, Mum, my headache's so bad. He said that. So I gave him some. And Thomas was going to his little friends, but it was a main road he had to cross to get to the friends. So I said to Bryce, I thought, well, he's only just had his treatment, his pain, so he might go to sleep, have a little sleep. I said, I won't be, it's only about 5 minutes away, but it's this road, so I was a bit worried, so I said, I'll be back in a minute. I come back, and he looked different. And I said, have you took another capsule, Bryce, have you? And we had an outside toilet then. And what he'd done is, he'd gone in the outside toilet and injected him with some more to stop the pain. So he'd give himself an overdose. So I had to get him up to Alder quick. then to get him in, and I told them what he'd done. But what made me angry was a couple of weeks when everything was, and he come home, he'd sent a drug person out, you know, if these houses somewhere where drug addicts. It was someone from there, and they were sending. And I went, I said, I'm not being funny or anything. I said, but what have you come here for? So she said, well, he's took an overdose. And I went, you know why he took an overdose? Because his head is absolutely killing him. I said, that's why he's took an overdose. I said, he doesn't go around injecting himself all the time. I said, he's not a drug user. I was absolutely fuming. I was fuming. I mean, they've got enough to contend with, and I've got stupid men coming out, and then a person saying he's sort of a drug addict. Oh, jeez, no. I kept him at home.
Brian was in and out of hospital quite a lot, I think, in the last couple of years of his life.
Yeah.
But you brought him home in May 1994.
Yeah.
And he died at home.
Yeah. Well, before that, back in the hospital, with all medication and that, you sort of, you're inside, bung up, you can't go to the toilet or anything. I remember one time, I come in and nurse were going to give her enema. And I don't know if it was just sizes or about them, but he said it was a big. And I remember her coming out, and I went in, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he had his back to me. He went, "I want to open the window, and I want to throw myself out because I've had enough." I said, "No, Bryce." He said, "I've had enough, Mum. I can't take any more." He said, "I've had quite a few of them now. I'm not having any more." He said, "I'm tired." He said, "I don't want to." And then that was the same as the pentamidine as well. He said, "This headache," he said, he said, he tried to kill himself again. 16-year-old trying to kill himself. So yes, I brought him home. Oh, come on, Brian. Stephen slept on the couch when he was at home. They brought a hospital bed out for Brian, and he was asleep on there. I thought but then he went into a coma, and he stayed. It was a few days, I think. I can't remember. It might have been 5 days. Might have been a week. The days were just. I just couldn't make heads or tails of all this. And I remember our haemophilia nurse standing there. The morning he died, my dad was there, and he was standing next to me. And Brian was there. But up to even then, I thought she was going to wake up and he was going to be all right. So she said, "Sue, let him go. It's time for him to go now." I can't. And she said, yeah. So then he was still in his coma, and he just went then. I said, and then Tom, can I say?
Yes, you can. Thomas thinks it's important you say.
Thomas. It was when Thomas thought he was sleeping, Brian. I don't even know if we told Thomas. he was in a coma. We might have just said he was asleep, because he was only, I think we just said to him, he's asleep. Because he got up, come down the stairs, gets on the bed with him. He thought he was still alive, puts his arms around him, and he was going, so we had to take him off him then, because I have to say, that's it.
Brian was 16 when he died.
60. Right.
Just take a moment, Miss Richards.
Sorry, mate. Sorry. I'm sorry.
You've got nothing to apologise for, Sue. So I don't have much more to ask you.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're going to carry on. Yeah, okay, we're going to carry on. Thomas, it's all right with us carrying on, okay? You told us about the change of wards in your statement at Alder, that you couldn't understand why there came a point at which a different ward was being used from the ward which the children were used to.
Yeah. Well, stop me if I can't say this, but I knew D3 then, which was on D3, because of Sister Hackle, my brother died on D3, not with haemophilia. And I knew her. So when I had children, she was still there. And she said, do you remember me? And I thought, well, I was only 9. And she said, I was one of the nurses that looked after your brother. So in the end, the lads were brought up basically by her. She nursed the boys right through. If we weren't sure for something, it was Sister you could always go to. And they loved the boys. The nurses loved the boys, absolutely loved them. So, to me, that was our ward. It wasn't a leukemia ward, it was the bloods ward, I always said. So then when we went over to C3, because eventually we were on D3, the boys, and then we got put on to C3 because there was a move over to C3. And Stephen went on C3 when he was admitted. And then one day I went in with Brian. He had a bleed. I seen Lynn she was on the little board. And I walked in and waited. Doctor come down. I thought that was a bit weird because Lynn, our doctor, was there. And I said, I just waited. Doctor come in. Says hello to Brian. He said, right, Mum, I'm sure you'll tell me what to do here. And I went, whoa. I said, don't even touch him. I said, have you treated haemophilia before? I said, no. I said, right. Don't go near him. I said, I'm going out of this room a minute. I said, don't even touch him. So we walked over there and I shouted to Lynn. I said, Lynn, your patient's here. He's got a bleed and he needs treatment. And she shouted back, I can't treat him, so I went, no, you're his doctor. She said, I've been told I can't treat anyone with haemophilia, I think she said. She said something like that. So I turned around and I went. So I just stood there then. And Sister Hackle come to me. I went, there's no one else. If you think he's going to put a needle near my child, he's got another thing coming. I said, because he's never treated any. We were all for people, students and everything like that. But no, not this time. They've been through too much. So anyway, in the end, Slim went, and she come and treated him. She was good.
So you've told us in your statement about the effect on you of everything you've described and your two boys dying in the way in which you've described it. You weren't able to work after this. You hadn't been able to work because you were looking after the boys, and you weren't able to work after this.
Yeah.
You occasionally got a bit of financial assistance from the trust and schemes.
Yeah, McFarlane Trust, yeah.
So I think they paid for a couple of sessions of counselling, but that was it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Dave, I got quite a few counselling things. I went back to it. So if I've been off and on counselling since the boys died. So it's, yeah.
But you said in your statement that in terms of asking for help from the trusts and schemes, it would sometimes feel like begging.
Yeah.
You've also used in your statement a really powerful phrase about what else was going on at Alder, because there were, as the inquiry has learned, a number of children infected with HIV and children dying, and you said that it was like a conveyor belt of children dying at that time.
You come in from a day out, phone would go, and it was another child had died. And I remember when, it was like a conveyor belt, child after child.
There's a point I know you want to make about the death certificates for the boys, so we're going to put those up on screen if that's all right.
Yeah.
WITN 1267 020 and 021, and if we can put them both up side by side, please. So we've got on the left Brian's certificate and on the right Stephen's. And when we look at the cause of death, it's bronchopneumonia and then haemophilia on the left. And on the right, pneumonia and haemophilia. And your point, as I understand it, Sue, and tell me if I've got it wrong, please, it wasn't haemophilia that killed them.
No.
It was AIDS.
Yeah.
And that's not on their death certificate.
That should have been, I don't know if there's a reason why it shouldn't have been on there, but they got no right to put haemophilia. God knows what they're putting haemophilia for. They didn't die of haemophilia. No.
We can take those down. Sue, I just want to read something from your statement. You say this, I relive it all every day, it never leaves you. Their birthdays are especially horrible every year. Brian loved art and Stephen was really good at maths. They wanted to do so much with their lives, but were robbed of the opportunity to do so. When Thomas and I went to London to the inquiry, it felt like I couldn't breathe. We've waited so long for justice. Is there anything else before we look at some photos and I check with others whether they have questions? Is there anything else you want to tell us about the impact on you of what has happened? You've set it out in your statement, so it's up to you if you want to say more.
I think it was when Stephen and Brian died. I just felt sorry for Thomas because I was in another world. I don't know. There was one day and I took an overdose and I drank a bottle of gin with it as well. And I can't remember if it had been ibuprofen or whether it had been paracetamol. I took one or the other, and they said if I took the other one, I would have been dead then. And then I tried to do it again. I took an overdose again, and a bottle of gin, but somebody come before it could get properly into my system. So, and then I just looked at myself and said, this is not fair on Thomas. He's been through so much as well. He's watched his brothers be ill, and I was just, I don't know, just, I didn't think they were going to die, see. I didn't. I said no all the time. When I was taking them, even when they were ill, they weren't going to die. No, they aren't even fully, they can't die. So I couldn't. So now it's hard, like for everybody. It's like Christmas. You think 3 boys and all the families, all the children, you think what might have been. I can only still see them as 9 and 16, but it's Christmas. A couple of weeks ago, it was Brian's birthday. Well, Christmas, you put flowers on. Then right after Christmas, it's Stephen's birthday in the February, so more flowers. Then in May, it's Brian's anniversary. Then in September, it's Brian's birthday. And then October, it's Stephen's anniversary. And then we're back to Christmas again. And it doesn't matter how many years go by, you're still asking, why? Why? And I keep going to the grave, and I keep saying, sometimes I think they're not there, they're going to walk in. And I think, no, they can't be. What? I just don't make sense of any of it. And I probably won't. I'll probably die thinking like this, because no, it will never go out of my head. I say good morning. I've got a cushion that Thomas kissed them, hugged them, do it at night, same, kiss, hug. Then went to the grave before I come here. Come with me, be strong for me, be with me. I know you're there. You've got to make me strong. So I'm saying it there, yeah, the other side of me. Why? Just want someone to tell me why. It won't bring them back. I just want them back so much. I just ache for them to come back. You can't get on with your life. You've got to be like 2 people. One person has got to be here all day, coming here today, coming and seeing neighbours, yeah, like there's nothing the matter. Then in the shower, anywhere I'm moving, I cry my eyes out. I just cry and go, why? Please. I just ache. I think it's like your heart, your heart's aching so much. Your whole body aches. I'm just mentally and physically tired, I think. I just want them back, and I can't.
So you gave us some photos of the boys. Yeah. We can, as the last thing we look at, we could put the photos on the screen for everyone to see if you'd like, but not if you don't want us to.
I've kept looking at them on my phone. They're on my phone, and I keep looking at them. And you can see the two little boys that played football in the back. I was trying to get photographs that sort of they scanned their lives with little bleeds on them. See how haemophilia?
Would you like us to show them?
If you,
Could we have the photos up?
you can see who I've been
Absolutely.
talking about then.
Exactly, Sue. Just go through the slide.
That's Brian, Sir Brian. I met you a long time ago when we were in Church House, Sir Brian, and I did say about Brian and Stephen, and you said good names.
Particularly one of them.
Then we've got them on the screen again.
There we are. Just two little boys.
The football.
Yeah. Here's Stephen. I'm Brian.
And there's Thank you, Lawrence. So, before I ask Sue if there's anything she wants to add, is there anything that you wanted to ask? Sue, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, God. Where is it? It's only little. Oh, I just... Oh, I might be able to remember what I was going to say anyway. I just want to say thank you to Sir Brian. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Jenny, all the inquiry team, and Colin's Law. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. We've spoke about Alder, but I want to say thank you to every nurse that looked after the boys. They were so caring. It was just, they were lovely.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Sir Brian.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you from me, from us. One of the things which you said just stuck with me. It was you just do what mums do.
Yeah.
And I think what you've shown us that many mums do is go on caring for a child, even though they're no longer here, feeling for their joys, as you've shown us in the photographs, and their pain and their suffering. And you're still caring just as much as if they were here. And your description of going to the grave and asking for strength shows that you're here doing it as part of that caring. To me. Am I right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
So can I suggest we take a slightly longer break and perhaps come back at 12:15?
Yes.
And then we'll hear the evidence from Elaine.
12:15.